platform API on top of another one, just as a transition mechanism, so that we can switch from one to the other. And eventually it will probably go away, but not by Firefox 3. So I mentioned sort of 3 areas of web standards that I wanted to talk about. The third one is scripting, which I'm going to talk about only very briefly. Sort of the main thing about scripting is that it's a way to make dynamic changes to a web page after the web page has been loaded. People have started doing lots more with scripting than it started out as. I think the original motivation for putting JavaScript in the web browser was, I think, because people wanted to do dynamic form validation and other dynamic stuff with HTML forms. But it's now turned into much, much more than that. There's Ajax and lots of new things based on scripting. So sort of the foundation of scripting in web pages is JavaScript, which is on its own just a programming language. And the implementation of that programming language in Mozilla is the Spider Monkey. The implementation is called Spider Monkey, and that lives in JS source. But then a lot of what scripts in web pages do is that they use methods that are described by the W3C DOM specifications, or by newer specifications being produced by the Web API working group at W3C, or just APIs that have never been standardized but that everybody implements. And these all describe methods and properties that are exposed to script. And the way we implement this in Mozilla is that we use XPCon, which I haven't talked about at all, but it's a cross-platform, well, it stands for cross-platform component object model, but one of the things it allows is it allows cross-language function calls. So we have this code called xpconnect that is a generic mechanism for allowing calls between JavaScript and C++. So we implement all of these interfaces that are defined in the DOM in C++ and use xpconnect to bridge the gap. And then the remaining code that is not the generic JavaScript programming language and not the generic mechanism for JavaScript and C++ code calling each other lives in the DOM directory, which is sort of the last piece that brings together all this stuff that you need for scripts and web pages to run. So that sort of covers those 3 areas that I wanted to talk about. So I'm open to any questions. Anything else you wanted to ask? Okay.
Can I ask one question about the scripting method related to the DOM wrapping? You mentioned about the dynamic change after a web page was loading. But sometimes in some web browsers, they do something when the web page is loading. For example, they write document.write or document.write when the page is loading. So it's very hell, I think. And Mozilla, the JavaScript engine, I think, produced some better results on this than the Internet Explorer. Because IE will sometimes give crash when the web page tries to document.write and at the same time some coding operating the DOM tree. So I just want to ask, what did you do on the conflicting or rather racing when these things happen.
So one thing about Mozilla that I think surprises many people is that Mozilla is single-thread. All the stuff that I talked about is single-threaded. There are some parts of Mozilla that use multiple threads, but so there isn't really a potential for strictly a race condition. Document.write is difficult to implement because essentially document.write was designed in the old world where web browsers did not actually produce a tree structure. And it becomes sort of a little bit difficult to implement now that you're producing a tree structure. Especially when you do things like have document.write a script element that includes a script that calls document.write. And yes, web pages do this all the time. I think it's how, it might be how Google Ads work. I'm not sure if that answers the question.
I think you have just answered my question because you mentioned you use single thread, and then single thread did not use so much as multi-thread.
Yeah.
But document.write maybe have some uses when you want to dynamically create a page before the page was fully loaded.
Yeah.
Because we cannot, or it's not very stable to change the DOM tree when the page was loaded. For myself, I always write code when after the DOM loaded, so the DOM tree is stable, so I can change the DOM tree and stable it, and the result was as expected. But sometimes it's just a lot of time because undownloaded is sometimes take just several seconds after the page was shown.
Yeah. So it probably would be nice if we had a better API for listening to the fact that a particular element is finished loading.
Yes,
so, for example, that we could fire an event saying that an element was loaded.
Yes. Just like Opera 9 introduced a new event called, sorry, I don't remember the exact name, but maybe the on-server, just some piece of DOM was loaded, and so people can pass the loaded elements before the whole page was loaded. It's very useful when you load very long pages or you just do some comments.
Yeah.
You just mentioned that we are not going to drop the old graphics GFX rendering engine in 5.3, so am I heard it right?
Yeah.
And so can I understand it as the official binary release on Mozilla.com will be based on Cairo, and other people still can build and custom build binaries to use the old GFX rendering?
Well, so the old graphics API was never really frozen to begin with. Although I suppose I don't know that there was a whole lot that was using the 2D graphics API outside of our code. Maybe people were, and I don't know about it. But